Namaste and welcome to another session of insightful conversations at AuroBharati. My name is Belu Mehra. I'm a senior academic mentor at AuroBharati, which is a vertical of Sri Aurobindo Society, focusing on studies and research in diverse areas related to Indian culture and society, and especially looking at the idea of how the eternal spirit of India is being expressed in new forms in the light of the vision of Sri Aurobindo and the Mother. And we have a monthly journal called Renaissance. It's an e-journal. And every month we invite people from different backgrounds in education, arts, literature, writing, and kind of to get a sense of how the timeless spirit of India and Indian culture is being renewed and reborn in newer ways, in new forms. So today we'll have a conversation on a very important topic that has to do with the history education in India, how Indian history is being taught in the Indian curriculum, or how it is being understood in Indian educational scene, and what are the challenges, what are the debates. So today we have with us two people right from the field of history education in India who are actually teaching Indian history at two different institutions. So welcome Dr. Pranjal and Dr. Neha. Before we begin the discussion, I'll just ask my colleague Isha Vidwaikar, who is a research and editorial assistant at Renaissance and various for other projects at AuroBharati, to briefly introduce our guests, and then we'll plunge into the discussion. Our topic today is Indian history in Indian education beyond ideologies and politics. So that's with that. Isha, would you introduce our guests, please? Unmute, Isha.
Yeah. Pranjal Garg, an alumni of SAICE, Sri Aurobindo International Center of Education, Pondicherry, specializes in ancient Indian history, culture, and archaeology. He completed his doctorate thesis on the Harappan studies and the contemporary Chalcolithic cultures of Western India. He has taught at postgraduate level at CBL University, Bhiwani, and at Maharshi Dayanand University, Rohtak. He is currently teaching at the Central University of Tamil Nadu, Thiruvarur, as an assistant professor. And Dr. Neha Singh, she teaches ancient Indian history at Shama Prasad Mukherjee College, University of Delhi. She holds a doctorate from the Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi. Her thesis titled Shiva's Kutumba, Literary and Iconographic Representations in Early Medieval Northern India, explores the interplay between Puranic Hinduism and society through the study of its mythology and mythography. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. This is very interesting because you both, Pranjal and Neha, bring a very interesting background of formal study in history, and with your interest in the intersection between religion, culture, society, and history. So that's the area I think we would like to explore with you a little bit. So my first question to both of you would be, because a nation's or a people's sense of identity is so tied up with the sense of history, the way people understand their past. Naturally, it's natural that there would be sort of ideological differences into the way people look at their past and the way they understand their history, their past. But in India, for some reason, this is such a hotbed of debates, political, ideological debates. So as students and now educators in the field of history, Indian history, and with your background in study of religion, ancient Indian culture, how do you see these two debates? What is your perspective on it? And how do you work around that if these things come up in your classrooms, in the actual work area where this is being taught. So whoever would like to take it up first, but I would like to hear from both of you on this question.
Neha?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you. I couldn't hear the last section of the question. Which debate?
Like in the sense of whether to what. Okay, let me just even go back a question. Go back to the question. What do you see as some of the key debates in Indian history? The way Indians understand our history. What are some of the key debates in the field of Indian history? Whether it is to be looked at, say from a Marxist perspective, or whether it should be looked at from a more, like a critical theory perspective, or whether it is to be looked at a more indigenous or Western Indological perspective. What are the key debates? There is like on an ordinary level, we look at it, okay, either this is the leftist version of Indian history or a more nationalistic version of Indian history. As professionals, as educators of Indian history, what, in your opinion, are the key debates in the way Indians have come to understand their history?
Well, I teach ancient Indian history and early medieval too. So the history of India as such, we begin with prehistoric period, where we are looking at the evolution of humankind. And then we see the development in culture, Paleolithic, Mesolithic, and Neolithic. And then we see transition from culture to civilization. The key debate that arises there is the identity of the current Hindu culture. How did it originate? So the Indologists initially were interested in knowing the majority of the Indians are Hindu. So what is the source that they refer to? And they started translating the Vedas. So I think it was in 1869, Max Muller translated the first version of Rig Veda. And from then on, this theory of Aryans began to play around. So who were they? So Europeans, because they wanted to associate themselves not with the Muslims, because Muslims were the immediate rulers against which they were pitching themselves. So they thought that, okay, let's say Aryans were more civilized like us, and so it must have originated somewhere in Eurasia or something related to Europeans. Well, so the nationalists took up this theory, and they said that we also had many things, and among them was the spiritual aspect of it. Marxists say that everything has a power structure, and so the Vedic society itself was also hierarchical, and it wasn't devoid of any segregation or exclusion. Then we have currently the focus is on cultural studies, and in that the debate has changed, and people say that Aryans, rather than invading Harappans and the Indian section, they migrated to India, and now I would say the more people who want to say that Aryans actually were Indians, they didn't migrate from anywhere. And in saying that, I think the issue here is of identity, and because when you talk about identity, it's about how did we originate, and when we look at past, so it's more of, if we belong to this land, we are the actual or the real owner of this subcontinent. So in that, I would say that this is the greater debate. And then we have how did Muslims came into India. That comes in early medieval period. And that is also being played by some sections of the society in India today. But we have to remember that any invasion, or for that matter, any theory that is circulating around how did Islam arrive in India, is to do with the economic prospects they saw in India. Because as far as religion is concerned, how long are we going to, humans have this tendency, and how long are we going to just survive on text and the name of the God? We need money. So this is the debate that we have to be in the class as a judge them carefully rather than thinking this is good or this is bad, bringing in moral judgments. Try to look at what were their reasons, and their reasons could be more economic than religious. And here I would like Dr. Garg to add something.
Thank you, Neha. That was a great explanation for a long period of time, coming from prehistoric till early medieval, and definitely covers up a lot of debates. But all of these debates actually are, as far as I have understood, they're rising from a sense of identity crisis, whether it is religious, whether it is economic, it is political, or it is of some sort that still again the crisis itself is unknown, that what is the reason why this crisis is being felt, because there are so many movements that have taken place in the past 100 200 years in different societies, different regions of the world, that have brought about a mixture into the whole analysis how one should perceive society. There are different perspectives which don't really let you come to a conclusion that what might be the reason for the crisis, which is one of the important questions that or one of the important inconclusive conclusions that historians have come to, that we cannot know the truth in history. So that in a way washes away the very purpose of one of the absolute quests of any subject, that you're trying to seek something in any of the subjects, and in history suddenly it becomes that you're not seeking something, because whatever you seek will not be found.
I would disagree with that. I think there is some truth to the past, and it is based on the sources we get that have survived. Yes, I would say that all the sources, whether primary, which includes textual and archaeological, are open to interpretations. Uh, and people will have, I mean, the scholars may have their own agenda to put forward through reading of those sources. But certainly, there are certain things that you and I both can go back again and again, and they would remain the same. The problem arises when we look at history not as a whole, and we try to leave certain aspects of it, and we say that this was the whole. So I would say that um, the thing is, I think identity crisis is happening primarily because there is no internal agreement. We are all looking for external agreement, and personally I feel there cannot be an external agreement, because externally we are very different. Internally, there is a universal truth, which since today is Guru Purnima, and this is also about the Indian culture that talks about, and by Indian culture I mean the Hinduism. Even within that, the Vedas and the Sant Mark. So I think the identity crisis is happening because we are not sure of where we are coming from. And we are sort of looking at the outer aspects of life and saying that, okay, if we can prove it to the other, probably then we can be sure of our past and our origin and ourselves.
Again, then there is this disagreement that you very finely put it, that we are disagreeing on the outward basis, while there is some agreement that one could come to internally. But again, why is this conflict coming in? That is something that a lot of historians are not thinking. They are, like you precisely said, that they're trying to prove each other their own interpretations, sometimes imposing them. Sometimes they have an agenda which is not really tallying with their own concept, but because they have to follow that agenda, that is why they are giving a certain explanation. But in spite of that all, you said one thing, that we are trying to find out from where are we coming. I think there's another question that historians should address, and not just historians, but we should make the students also think that where are we heading towards, and that will help us, join the two links, because we are present. We are trying to find out the truths of the past, but if we don't connect it to future, then there will always be a missing link. We will not know from where to where the whole trail is following. So again, that perspective is one of the perspectives that is missing in history, because we restrict ourselves to past, and we if we do not see the whole evolution, be it physical, be it mental, be it psychological, or any other further planes. Some people dismiss any search for metaphysical aspects in history. If all of this evolution, where it is heading towards, if we do not look into that, then we are looking into, our criteria for history, writing history, understanding is incomplete. We are leaving out certain objectives which are quite essential and necessary for our quest in history, which is why this might be one of the reasons why there are so many conflicts and debates which need not be sometimes.
Yes, that's true. Because philosophy is, I mean, in modern social sciences, is considered to be another subject altogether. And history is considered to be more of political, economic, and social background, not relating to religion or philosophy, or for that matter, metaphysical aspect of human life. And without it, it's always going to be incomplete, in that sense that we are not going to find all the answers. I mean, answers in the sense that it won't fit logically. The pattern won't fit logically. Will Yes. Without it, I think we'll keep on proving it to ourselves and others that this is the right version of the past.
I think this is a very important point, especially in the context of India, where the metaphysical aspect, the spiritual aspect, or the inner aspect of life and existence and meaning and purpose of life has been given such great significance by our ancestors. And which kind of, you spoke about internal versus external agreement, or internal versus external discord, in terms of identifying who are the original natives, if you will, and who are the outsiders who have come in, whether through invasion or for whatever reason, religious and or economic. So the question then is that in Indian context, the ways in which history is understood, the history as an academic discipline is taught and understood, or the way history is written, would you, as again, as educators, as long-time students of Indian history and now educators of Indian history, do you think there needs to be some rethinking of how history is written in India, given the Indian uniqueness, the Indian civilizational uniqueness or Indian cultural uniqueness, where this distinction between what is material life or what is metaphysical life was not as strong as maybe in other civilizations. So the integrality of knowledge has to be somehow brought in to the way history is understood and written and taught.
I think I agree with that, because there's a huge need to look at all aspects to create a comprehensive sense of history. Because mostly the way up till 12th history is taught, it's like, okay, this came, and this political unit came, and this empire came, and this religion came up, and then this happened, and that's it. So the entire point of education is to develop an internal interpretation of the world that is based on certain conviction, and conviction cannot happen unless you experience it yourself. So when we come to graduation level, even at the BA level, bachelor's, the more focus is, okay, you read certain sources, and then like you keep repeating them in your head, and then you produce them in your exams. It is only in the masters and PhD that we begin to look at, and that also depends on the kind of institute that you are going to, that encourages you to critically analyze everything that is being given. So that is being given in terms of the sources. And why I keep saying the sources are important, because without sources, it's almost like WhatsApp university going around. We are talking about rumors and gossips. Um, Unless we quote certain sources, we won't be able to prove ourselves. Uh, I mean, to myself and the others, that this, and when you say that there has to be a connection between the metaphysical and the external world happenings, then yes, that is necessary very much, primarily because conviction comes from within. And if you know the self, um, I think it helps you carry your life much more confidently, and your research work as well. I hope I'm making sense.
Yes, definitely you are.
Yeah,
It is
yes.
interesting that such aspects are not considered by most historians, and even teachers are not aware, which is why they cannot send such ideas or echo such ideas in their classes, and students are left with very factual knowledge of history very often, which is why they find it very boring. It's one of the very boring subjects. And another reason why I felt like we were going to discuss why things are not going in a very interesting way in the classrooms is that we are dismissing mostly the entire gamut of sources, because sources is a very important aspect of history. The entire gamut of sources that are brushed off as mythology, especially when you get new students in masters. They have only focused on British history, only focused on the past 800 years from today. So they have either studied medieval or mainly focused on modern history. So all that was before that is mythology, is just something so far fetched, so far off from their present, from their society, and a lot of people, of course, because of the community they might be coming, they are not very interested in reading about those things, and which is why they do not even feel that that should be part of syllabus sometimes. So it becomes a very important task for a teacher, even at university level, because you cannot do anything what has happened in primary level or secondary, higher secondary level. or even graduation. But at university level, to when a student is already mature, he has his own ideas, his own concepts, or even agendas. He has formulated or decided which sides he's going to take. Then you introduce a very new concept if the teacher is aware of it, that mythology is an important source. We need to consider it. We need to reconsider it. We need to rethink it from a new perspective. It becomes a very difficult thing, because sometimes when initially I had started teaching, one of the students said, "Sir, why are you teaching this Mahabharat, Ramayana, etc.? That's not what we have come here for. We want to study history." So they have a clear-cut demarcation of what is history and what is not history, in spite of the sources that they should have been studying. That this is very much part of history.
Yes, yes. I think you brought up another very important point we must discuss. And given again both your backgrounds, Pranjal and Neha's yours as well. Neha, you have also looked at the intersection of society and mythology, religion and history in your own doctoral work. And you also teach religion and society, if I remember correctly. So how do you, and I want to hear from Pranjal your experience as well. How do you, from your classroom experience, how do you engage with this discussion with your students when they say, no, this is mythology, this is not history? What's your experience like? Neha, you can you did you were you able to hear my question?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
I think this in common parlance, mythology is considered to be like not history primarily because myths are open ended. They're open to different interpretations, and but basically they are narratives in the sense they hold, I would say, they hold the past in a way that is not imposing or prescriptive. It is descriptive, and one can learn the lesson that they desire. And mythology as history is very important primarily because when we are trying to understand the minority section, which doesn't write much, and they're more they develop mostly the folklore, and through the study of folklore myths about their background, we get to know more about them rather than waiting for inscriptions and texts which may or may not be available for that particular region. And in that sense, we can tell our students, the first thing we need to tell our students and students of history is to be open minded about everything. Because when you embark on such a journey where you wish to learn more and more, and you throughout your life you wish to be a learner, you cannot say, oh, I know this much, and beyond that, I do not wish to know. Someday, someone will change your perspective, will bring you something that you lack in your understanding, and it the entire point of living an academic life is to become more tolerant, more empathetic. uh, it is also the entire purpose of education that we understand each other even if we cannot agree. So myths in that sense also speak about how disagreements are dealt with. For instance, the myth where goddess Parvati, that's because I'm citing this example because I have read it. So, goddess Parvati, I mean, Lord Shiva jokingly says that you are Kali. So she's angry and she says that fine, I'll do penance and I'll change myself and I'll become Gauri. So she goes to the uh, uh, cave and does she does penance, and goddess Parvati turns Gauri. But the outer layer of Kali that she dissociates herself with forms into the Kali goddess, who then kills the demons. So here one can, a gender historian can look at the myth and understand it in how gender theme is dealt in Hinduism. Here, the spiritual aspect, for somebody who is trying to understand the spiritual dimension of Hinduism, he can see that he or she can see that Kali doesn't mean the outer skin color. It is the darkness of the psychology that Shiva is joking about. And why would a person like Parvati would do penance to attain fair complexion? Gauri is also, it means removed of darkness. So she becomes white in the sense she attains enlightenment. She sharpens her inner being and becomes luminous. And then she again becomes equal to Shiva. Well, she's already is. So, so this is how myths can be interpreted in two different ways. There can be other ways as well, depending on the reader. And yes, so mythology tells us many things.
So, Pranjal, do you want to just pick up from where what you were saying when you started discussing Mahabharata in your classroom, and how did you engage with the students? How did you sort of unpack this thing that mythology serves a certain purpose, especially in the context of Indian history or knowing India's past? Unmute.
I'll take it up. I'll take it up from where Dr. Neha has left.
Yes.
About the example that she gave, there is a perspective of the gender studies. There's the perspective of somebody who's seeking, uh, a symbolism, spiritual meaning behind what is described in some Puranas or some mythological stories. What my basic objection, I know it's a strong word that I'm using, but still I would like to use it, that my objection has been that why we are not we are interpreting history always subjectively, from the sense that how we see it, while what has been written, whatever the source has been written, we should try to see the perspective of the author. What was he and why was he trying to convey a certain thing? Was he thinking of gender studies? He might have, definitely. Was he thinking of a symbolism? He might have, definitely. Was he thinking of conveying something apart from simply these two things? How many perspectives? Like if you see any of the Puranas, uh, there are moralistic approach that is quite clearly visible. There is something spiritual about it. There is something symbolic. There's something related to life, something related to beyond life, something metaphysical, and there is a lot of history. There are a lot of facts in it. There are a lot of real-time truths, events that might have taken place, that definitely would have taken place or might not have taken place. So it's again and written by mostly uh, poets. They were writing in poetry form, which is again something that is uh, not only a trend that usually was taken up in ancient times, whether we have uh, Iliad or Odyssey or any of the other, even Greek mythology, Greek drama. It's all written. Most of it is written in poetry form, especially when something deeper comes in, something that is of a greater and deeper emotion. So there'll be a sudden shift uh, from the regular verse to poetry. So what is the reason behind this? That is something that has not been investigated at all, that is not within the criteria of investigation of any of the approaches that historians are taking usually. And that becomes something very unfortunate, because when we are not trying to see why, what was the purpose, when we are looking at Shakespeare, when we are looking at Molière, we are looking at any of the writings after Renaissance, uh, we are often seeing the kind of social satires that were written, that this was the purpose of writing this particular work of literature. We are always trying to see what was the conditions of the society that time, that there was a need to write such a piece of literature, or there was such a need to build such a piece of art, even if it is about architecture, it is about sculpture. The need of the society, the need of the time, the whole psychological, the communal social psychological construct was such that something of the sort came about. Otherwise, there was no need why Renaissance took place at the time when Renaissance took place. There was no need why Industrial Revolution took place when it took place. So it is definitely a dire need that brought about the whole explosion of certain art or certain industrialization, certain colonization, or whatever other movements. So what becomes important, and that is what I tell or try to draw attention of the students, that we have to try to search, because I'm always expecting and telling my students that the masters is not just a simple degree that you will gain and then go back to your fields and plow them, or things like that. It should make you think. It should, you have come for education, you're not just come for a degree. At least that is what I felt during my education here, when I was doing my graduation at SAICE. So it becomes very important to, once again, after a long duration of mugging up and writing exams, to again make them think, because this is a time when they are quite perturbed in that age with the things that are happening in the society, with the things that are happening. They hear the news, they hear uh, debates, they hear controversies, they hear a lot of things that is very disturbing for them. And often the history students and even students of other classes, other subjects, they have this query. And we get to see that when we have courses like open elective in the universities, where students of different disciplines, different departments can join that course and profit from the discipline that they have left back sometime in sixth, seventh, or eighth standard in the school. So now they are full of questions. Whether it is somebody from chemistry, physics, biology, life sciences, uh, political science, or history, they're full of questions, and they ask a lot of questions about all the debates that they've been hearing on the TV, on while talking to their peer group, while talking to their parents, talking to elders. They have objections, they have reactions, which they really throw out in the class. And that is the time when you can actually again make them think. You can take that opportunity and make them think, make them feel that yes, your objections are worth it, they are reasonable. And that is where history plays a very important role. I have seen that we can take it as an opportunity and make them think that you need to have your original thinking, why there are reasons that society has formulated certain rules, why society has certain norms, why society has a particular way, the way it is living. That is for a given purpose, but that purpose should not stop you from thinking, that should not stop you from exploring more, but within the boundaries of the social construct, the social harmony, the social well-being. Again, you have to keep balancing their revolutionizing, protesting approach, their protesting temperament that is becoming more and more aggressive at that age. And that is, I find that is a very uh, constructive age, while at the same time, if it is not channelized well, if it is not taken care of, it can go wayward. And that's where, when a child does not get reasonable answers, satisfactory answers to all those queries that people have been dismissing all throughout since past few years, whether they were at home, whether they were in their peer group, whether they were in any other part of the society. Most of the people would dismiss most of their queries and objections, and everybody is feeling a little tied down by the kind of norms we have in the society, which are again becoming very turbulent, very disturbing, because there are movements with all the internet and social media. There are so many movements that are so close to them, that are open to them, they are aware about them. Earlier, we had a society where these kind of movements were restricted, they were taboo, they were not, part of the general awareness of growing youth. But it is now there everywhere. You have people protesting on the roads, and that comes live in the TV, in the news, and they are aware of it all. So it becomes very important as a teacher of history to channelize their thinking, to make them feel that raising objection is not a wrong thing. Having your interpretation is not a wrong thing. But finally, you should be able to validate that and see how fruitful and how constructive it is for your future. Again, coming back to the same point that I was telling initially, that if we cannot connect our past to future, if our past is not helping us lead to a brighter future, there's something wrong in our approach of looking at our past. I'm not giving too many examples, but giving the concept so that we can understand why it is very important to connect the two, the past and the present.
Yes, the past, present, and future. I want to just bring in Isha. Isha, you said you had some questions about.
Yes, he mostly answered all the questions that I had. One question was like, how would you suggest, like in brief, how would you suggest school students to study this subject? Because we are mostly taught with dates and which are very boring, as obvious. So just to have a Catholic approach towards the subject, what would you suggest?
My perspective was to, especially when we are so rich with mythology in India, we have so much of oral traditions that have been translated in other languages and have been borrowed as it is, like Fable de la Fontaine, which is Aesop's fables, etc. Panchatantra. What I'm referring to is, uh, we should teach this as history. I mean, why even have a history class? We used to have something like EVS, environmental science, or social science, social studies type of thing, and they would tell us all sorts of things to us. So I don't think we should be studying history as a subject, history, in our country right now, because none of the countries are doing that. They are in their school level. They are teaching all sorts of fantastic things, because is the time, like, a child is growing, his creativity is growing, and this kind of poetry and mythology helps in growing his creativity, in enlarging his perspectives of something that is not restricting. When we talk of history, we talk of dates, we talk of dynasties and kings and things that are clearly defined. That puts a barrier on the imagination that a student can have. So we should let it be free, we should let it be full of stories, and those stories are finally going to connect to all that he's going to study finally in his graduation or in his masters. And we are having to tell those stories now. I mean, when I had to teach the different sources, literary sources, I had to tell different stories of Buddhism, different stories of Jainism, different stories of Hinduism, of Mahabharata, Ramayana. People don't even know the basic story of Ramayana and Mahabharata. So that is very unfortunate, because that is part of our mythology. You have all the other countries that are without any debate, without any controversy, without any objection or any ideological problems and debates, controversies, barriers. They are teaching whatever they want to. We can have that. We can teach things, and we fortunately have so many religions in our country. We can teach stories from Islam, we can from Quran, we can teach recount stories from Bible, from Jainism, the different literature of Jainism, Hinduism, definitely, Buddhism. But why not? And it will all be helpful in understanding history. And even if the student does not finally choose the subject of history for his future career, he would have profited in his subject much more than if he would have, simply studied a few dates in his early education. It won't help a student, take up chemistry so much if he studied a few dates of history. But if he has studied some mythology, if he has studied some stories of this kind of different religions, I won't restrict it to even Hinduism or Quranic stories. Tell him stories of all the religions, and he will see something greater than what a historian can see today, because he's not biased of that kind. He's not. He doesn't have philosophical constraint. He is a free mind. We are usually restricting, we are constructing a mind. We want, we have a ladder for him, and we want him to climb that ladder. We don't want him to jump the wall, but the idea is to cross over to the other side. So if we try to see things in this way, and that is where maybe uh, you know uh, the different experiments that teachers are trying now, education, uh, whole entire entire education, UGC, etc., these institutions are trying to build something more constructive, more free flowing than the binding education that we have, exams and mugging up the things and the facts and etc. Instead of that, a more free flowing education is definitely going to profit the students, the people of this country, right from the primary level.
So it came down to a very deeper level that you should make children think for themselves, make them question, because what we did in our schools was just to bug up. Like, we never think why, or we are never taught to question. So yeah, the problem is at a deeper level that you're supposed to think and question, which is quite the opposite at present.
Yeah. Isha is currently working with younger children at a school, and she's also had some experience at Delhi, right? In
Mirambika
at
pre-progress school.
Mirambika, and also at what's the school, Matri Kiran now, right? In Hyderabad, New Creation.
New
Sorry,
creation school.
right. So that's based on again the integral educational philosophy of Mother and Sri Aurobindo. So yeah, this is, you are at the right place to start making some changes in the way. Again, it goes back to the integrality of disciplines, integrality of knowledge, rather than dividing things into different disciplines and uh, you know making children mug up facts. So Neha, would you like to add something to that?
No, I
From
think
your
certainly if we take up multidimensional educational approach, it would benefit primarily because you may have one thing in this subject, something else to learn from that subject. But if children are encouraged to choose what they wish to learn rather than okay, learn this and this and this, and by the time they're in 12th standard, the parents have decided what they have to do. And certainly this the kind of objections today's generation is having is primarily because they wish to explore and they are not giving it an opportunity. uh, and I think, yes, so that kind of approach should be taken up, but it should be balanced what the outcome can be, the repercussions of their choices. So an informed choice would definitely help.
One other question. I think, Pranjal, you hinted on that earlier, that maybe in many other countries, many other societies, there isn't that much of a debate about understanding their past or connection between identity and history. And as we see here in India, um, does it have to do, I mean, when we are talking about the relationship between identity and history, what role does the idea of nation and national identity, nationalism, play into that? Are we really so, I mean, is there such a lack of confidence in our being a full-fledged, complete nation in itself, that we need some kind of like a support from our past, that yes, we have been a nation for so long, and hence we are who we are. I mean, from where does this lack of confidence come? Or why do we, why is this nationalism versus, I don't know, some other ism debate that has come up, and the discipline of history has been used to have that debate, have that discussion, even like a conflict, battle about it.
Yes, Binudi, this is one of the most difficult things to deal with, I think, because again, in a way, comes back to the identity crisis, and the the problem, as I can see it, as is that we do not understand what is nation. We do not understand. We see it as something that is politically bound, something that is not, all that is around. That is what we are. What is our nation is what is, at the boundaries, not our nation. That's what defines our nation. But somehow, especially being part of, studying ancient Indian history, we have this very loose idea of nation, because the boundaries kept changing always. Especially when I am dealing with archaeology, I kept pushing myself in the times that are older and older. I started with ancient history, then went to archaeology, then further did my doctoral in urban studies, and I realized the whole concept of nation uh, kind of collapses. And as the time proceeds, as there are people who are needing boundaries, the historians have thought about it, how nation building took place, how these political boundaries came about, and the reason why they needed to be there, these boundaries, because you cannot just have, when there was this need of determining till where is my land, till where can I plow, till where can I sow, from what are the natural resources that I can harness. When this need appeared, that's what historians understand it as, that you try to define your boundaries, and when you try to define your boundaries, and you needed your boundaries to be extended further for the need of your natural resources which are left out, which are not part of your boundaries, you try to extend your boundaries. And because you wanted to extend your boundaries, you had this clash of one kingdom with another, and all sorts of political history starts. So, but in spite of that, we still do not understand what is nation, and our youth is most unaware of what nation could be, what nation sense is. And there's this whole confusion with all the approach that historians have taken of nationalism. What is anti-nationalism, what is, the leftist approach. Is it really against nationalism? Because they didn't want to dismiss nationalism. Even some nationalists are not so nationalists, and the nationalists that we see during the time of independence struggle were very different in their approach than the nationalists we have today and the nationalists we had 20 years ago. So the whole sense of nationalism is changing without even understanding what is a nation. And especially if you read Sri Aurobindo, he has a very different approach of what a nation is. If you read some other philosopher, they define nation in a different way. A historian defines in another way. Again, even if you see people of the whole academia, you see that a person from international relations will see nation as a different thing. A person of political science will see it as different. Defense studies will see it as different. Historian will see it as different. A person of literature will see it as different again, because each one's boundaries are flowing in different levels. When you see someone, say, of Hindi literature, he will very easily include, some regions of Urdu speaking, Punjabi speaking, which is not Hindi speaking, into his nation, because that's all part of Hindi literature. When it comes to a historian, he will say that, okay, this cannot be part of how we understand nation as, because at that particular year this was divided and this went away, this was not part of our nation, this was again another portion was divided in this year. So each one has his own perspective, where some perspectives are trying to uh, divide and see things because that's how they would like to categorize, which is not a right or wrong thing. Again, this right and wrong thing is a completely imaginative idea, because what is right for you is not right for another person, and that's where the whole interpretation in history comes in, and that's where the whole reason why there are so many debates come in. But in spite of that, we need to think again that what is nation, and when we are trying to be for nation, all of these people whom often in news channels and other debates we call them anti-nationalists, they're living in a nation. They're proud of a nation. If they're not proud of the nation they are living, they're proud of some nation at least. So they are nationalists. They might not be nationalist of this country, they might be nationalist of another country. But they are nationalists. There is no one who is not nationalist. Because everyone who identifies himself with a particular land, with a particular governance, with a particular culture, is a nationalist of some kind. So there can be so many perspectives to this. There's so many definitions to this that it's almost impossible to debate with anyone. But in spite of that, if we really think, why people are not able to understand history is they are not thinking that why they are writing such a history, why they are defining what they are defining as. They're simply defining because there has been a trend of writing history. This is what you have to include. These are the criterias. This is the system, and these are the sources you have to consult. And you have a formula. We don't want to get rid of any formulas. And the whole reason, the whole quest in history is to get rid of one formula, because there's a new formula that has to trend very soon, which is why there's this whole school of historiography that speaks of a new school coming every now and then. What Greeks were writing as history, we are not writing the same way. What in the medieval times or Middle Ages they were writing as history, we are not writing in the same way. Even 10 years ago, we were writing history in a different way than what we are writing today, because we have been always changing our formula of writing history. Now, again, the formula needs to change probably to understand what a nation is. And of course, I will not open up the debate of what a nation is or could be, but we need to think about that. All the historians need to think about it, because how a historian defines a nation becomes most important for all the other disciplines. Because whenever it comes to nation, they all look at a historian. How does he say? What does he say? When was the last division? When was this territory taken away? Was this territory taken away in a very valid and democratic way or not? So all of that debate, everyone looks at historians. So how a historian defines a nation becomes most important and critical in a society.
Neha, would you like to share something about it, since you studied at an institution where these debates about nationalism and anti-nationalism are quite commonly, I mean, at least they are matter of news. So yes.
See, the entire concept of nationalism is very modern, and it's very European. If we try in, and it developed there primarily because they wanted to unify themselves on the basis of religion or race. And in India, the scenario is entirely different. We have so many different states, languages, and ways of living that what unified us during the freedom movement was the suffering we experienced at the hands of the Britishers. And it was that that led to our understanding that we need to free ourselves from such kind of treatment. We need better government, and we gifted ourselves democracy. We are the largest democracy in the entire world. And the institution that I come from, that is JNU, the entire point that is being raging about nationalism is that we are certain section is trying to impose this one idea of nation onto others. And the moment you try to, like I raised this issue earlier, that if we go for external agreements, there can never be. Either I have to be a ruler to make everyone shut up and agree with me, which shouldn't be the case. If And it depends from where I am coming. If I am secure in my sense of self, and which cannot exist without the, I would say, enlightenment. But people say, oh, no, enlightenment is for old age. And without, so I would say, and this is the reason, if we try to impose certain ideas on someone else, and they're saying that they wish to live in a way that is not hurtful to others, and they wish to exist within the kind of political boundary that we have accepted after 1947, then I think they should be allowed to express themselves. It is only the freedom of expression that they're asking for. But that is seen as something that they would try and change the government and make it much more anarchic. But I don't think that is the agenda here. So we should not forget that, yes, our past was great, but what we are making of it today, we are proud of the past. I mean, I am a Hindu, and my entire life has been revolving around religion and rituals. But to say that I must impose such a lifestyle on others would be saying that they must agree. But that agreement comes from the fact that they have experienced certain kind of belongingness to something in Hinduism. And if that can't be, then I must be happy with my own religion. So I think this is the reason democracy is I think it gives the right to the person to say what they wish to, but at the same time we should be aware that we shouldn't hurt anyone. I mean, there should be a sense of accountability, and that cannot come unless we are sure of ourselves. So I think whatever little I have read Sri Aurobindo, and he talks about the inner intuition that takes precedence once the person is enlightened. Without inner intuition, there can be no conviction, and without conviction, there can be no confidence. And without confidence, we'll keep on insulting each other. That happens on television debates, or calling each other a nationalist and anti-nationalist, this is wrong, that is wrong. So rather than going for external agreements, I would say go for internal agreement. And that is never with the other person, it is with the divine truth. And I think the beauty of Hinduism is that the Sant mark has survived till date. And today is a golden opportunity that any section of the society, any person can access that knowledge, which was not accessible to everyone in the past. So we are living in the best of the phase of this world, and we should make use of it. So, yes.
Well,
There's one thing I would like to add to this.
yes.
That what she mentioned, we had a wonderful past. Again, I've seen a lot of teachers debate, because after the classes sometimes we'll still sit in the staff room and we'll have teachers taking one of the sides, whether we were great or we were not great, depending on the agenda and the sometimes the community that they belong to, unfortunately, that played a role in their perspective of history. But whatever sides one take, I think it is very important to tell a student that India had its greatness and India had its uh, times when there was a sorrowful dips in its progress. And we should not deny that. Why should we deny that? There were problems. We did not, it's such a vast subcontinent. It has so many types of communities. It has, different social divisions. It has different cultures. I think a very great variety of cultures where there is bound to be some sort of problems, whether it is political, whether it is religious, sectarian, it can be of any kind. And there were problems because of which better things evolved sometimes, or sometimes we went into a more distorted kind of culture. We rolled back uh, to an unprogressive society sometimes, and that is all right there in front of us. We should not deny that. We can belong to uh, any of the sects. We can belong to any of the isms. We can be nationalist and still deny or still accept, sorry, that there were problems in our country. We have had a very long past, and the longer the past, the more there will be problems. You have a country that is just 200 years old that could have so many problems. Then we are a country that has at least 5,000 years old history. Why can't we have problems? And we had problems. We should not deny that. So that again does not dismiss the gloriousness of it. We had, parallel series of glorious past. We had again at the same time problematic societies. We had problematic people. We had, recoils of different sorts. So it was a mixture of it all, and there's no point in trying to emphasize every time that it was all good. It was not an all good society. It was
I
not a
am
perfect
saying,
society.
I was saying
No, no, no,
that
I'm just adding to
yes.
that. I'm not
Okay, I
defining
was.
it.
I'm just. Uh, I was saying that yes, we had greatness, but if we do not make use of it in the present time, it is of no use. So I'm saying that we need to be accountable today of how we act within a society. And when in Hinduism, it is said that you need to be content with what you have. That sentence doesn't say that it is to become passive and non-involved in the creation of uh, in the creation of the skills that would benefit the larger society. It is to say that you be still within and then you move ahead. That will give you a greater clarity. Thank you.
I think this has been really enriching to hear sort of, I mean, you both bring in very interesting, rich perspectives, somewhat converging and somewhat taking us in many different directions. And, it's so interesting that the theme that we are working on for this August issue of Renaissance, in which we will be, your conversation is going to be featured, is sincerity. So the significance of sincerity and steadfastness to the truth of things, however complex and maybe at times uncomfortable the truth might be, and to walk away from any sense of any sort of hypocrisy. That's what to be sincere means. And if India, if as Indians we cannot be sincere in our understanding of where we are coming from, whether it is 5,000, 10,000, 8,000 years of history, where we are with all kinds of problems, as Pranjal pointed out, and where we are heading. That's the sincerity we need in our education as well. So I know we can continue, and there are a few more questions that at least are coming up in my head, but in the interest of time, we'll probably have to wind up at this point, and maybe at some future date, you would like to come back and we can pick on few more things coming more from archaeology background with Pranjal and your very interesting study on Quranic Hinduism, Neha. So let's see how things evolve. So thank you so much. Isha, do you have any questions at this point or?
My questions were all answered. I
Good.
was quietly listening to them, enjoying by myself.
Yes, lot of interesting lights you have thrown on various points. And as I was, I was really hoping for a conversation that takes us beyond the TV level debates that are happening in the field of Indian history and Indian history in our education. So you really taken a notch above, that kind of thing by bringing in these very interesting lights on this subject. So thank you so much, both of you, Dr. Pranjal and Dr. Neha, for spending this much time with us. And we wish you all the best for your future endeavors. And do come, Neha, sometime to Pondicherry. Pranjal, of course, is coming. So we'll show you around. We'll have some conversation face to face as well. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Isha. Thank you, Billy.